We're going to talk Florida State with Jeff Cameron from Warchant, because if you're not a Warchant subscriber or a Warchant TV subscriber, which is their YouTube channel, that's On3's Florida State site is Warchant, the longtime Florida State fan site, then you might have missed some really spicy quotes tonight from Florida State board chair Peter Collins. We're going to play you some of those, and Jeff's going to help make sense of them for us. He's going to help break it down because he is in the thick of things in Tallahassee. We'll be talking Noles when we come back. So let us talk about bird dogs. Are you living the most efficient life you possibly can? If you're not wearing bird dogs, then you're not, because these are the greatest shorts and pants you've ever worn, because they have a built-in liner that feels like it was made for you, and you never once have to buy underwear or wash underwear again if you're wearing bird dogs. Right now, currently, hold on, gotta get up to the camera. I'm wearing my Indianapolis Joneses with the neon yellow liner. Tremendous pants. I've also got my tight wads that I love. Now, of course, our banner is right across my butt. If you could see my butt from behind the banner, which you can't because the banner's up there and we want you to see the promo code, they make your butt look incredible. Incredible. So, what if you want to live efficiently up top? Well, Bird Dogs makes polos now too. So, go to birddogs.com/Andy. You can use the promo code Andy as well and get a free tech hat with your order. birddogs.com/Andy. Promo code Andy. Live your most efficient life. Stop wasting your time buying underwear and washing underwear. You don't have to do it anymore. Have the perfect fitting shorts and pants for every occasion and never have to worry about what's under them, because you're covered with Bird Dogs. birddogs.com/Andy. Promo code Andy with a free tech hat and the best shorts and pants and now polos that you've ever had. Jeff Cameron joins us. Hi, Jeff. Oh, Jeff's mic's not on. We got Jeff muted. We gotta unmute you, Jeff.
That shouldn't be the
Look
case.
You're back. There you
back.
are.
I'm here. I'm good. Are we good?
Oh yeah. You can find Jeff at @JCameronShow on. I'm still calling it Twitter. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure.
And warchant.com. And Jeff, I'm sure that for you, as a person who does shows, this past couple of weeks has been glorious.
Yeah, buddy. You know, I've covered Florida State on radio in one way or another for 20 plus years. And yeah, you live for things like this because in the weeks leading up to camp, it's about position battles and depth charts and those kinds of things, which can get monotonous, as you well know.
Yeah.
Always fun and can be engaging, but it's kind of the same old till you get out there and you see the guys in pads. To have this, quite literally, Florida State's future up for debate and everybody wanting to weigh in on this topic, and then having the Board of Trustees and Peter Collins willing to talk about it and be quite candid, frankly, and say more than I thought he would, is, it's a gift. It's a gift from the sports talk gods.
Well, let's start with Peter Collins. And you know, this dates back to February, where there was a Board of Trustees meeting, and Michael Alford, Florida State's athletic director, is giving his report to the board, as athletic directors tend to do. They'll you know, that's part of a normal board meeting, is they'll bring in the dean of this college and the dean of this college, and the athletic director will come in and say, here's what we're doing. Here's the issues we're dealing with. There were some very pointed questions to Michael Alford, and I'm well, I know it was somewhat performative, but Peter Collins and Michael Alford had quite a back and forth about the situation with the ACC, the amount of money that Florida State gets from the ACC relative to what schools in the SEC, which, by the way, Florida State must recruit against all the time, and schools in the Big Ten will get when all their new TV deals kick in. And it rang some alarm bells in the SEC, because it basically was, or in the ACC, because it was Peter Collins and Michael Alford saying, hey, something needs to change here.
They were screaming to the heavens. It was a clarion call. This is untenable. We cannot sit idly by and watch as those that we chiefly compete against, as you said, Florida State is in the footprint of the SEC. They have to compete against the University of Florida, obviously Georgia and everybody in the area for recruits. And Florida State has done, and they're very proud of it, a great job over the years in doing just that. But the further one sees themselves removed from an even playing field economically, the more likely it is, as we all know, that that competition becomes one-sided. And Florida State recognizes that. You can't continue to try to compete at the highest levels when your opponents are pulling in upwards of 30, 40, $50 million a year more than you, because you lose the race for facilities, and any coach you have that anybody else wants, especially at one of those schools, now becomes somebody you can't afford to keep because they'll offer them more money than you have. So I think they recognize that come hell or high water, they have to get out of this conference. And it's why you see the hand wringing. It's why you see the very public comments, because sitting still and being threatened with the idea of a lawsuit if you tried to leave because of the grant of rights is no way to handle this situation. No matter what somebody else may think about the possibilities of winning legally in court and getting out from under the albatross of the grant of rights, as Florida State sees it, it's still untenable either way. You're better off fighting it through court because you lose no matter what if you sit still till 2036.
And the other part of this that I found interesting, something that Peter Collins brought up tonight, NIL is a piece of this too. And Florida State's done pretty well with that. Here's where the NIL stuff comes. Florida State is good at raising money. That's where you can divert that to NIL. You don't have to directly do it, but you can basically nudge, hey, sure, that money you're going to give to us for that capital project, give it to NIL. The problem is Purdue or Mississippi State or whoever can divert that money more easily because they are getting so much more from their conference.
Correct.
And so let's hear, we'll start with Peter Collins talking about how well Florida State raises money that is not coming from their conference revenue share.
And Florida State does a really good job of raising money outside of, let's say, the TV contracts. I mean, if you take our budget outside of, take the TV contracts out of it and you put us, say, in the Big Ten, I mean, I think we're fourth in the amount of money that we generate in the athletic department. Same thing in the SEC. A lot of people don't realize that. So
that's important. But here's the next piece of it. Is it insurmountable? That's the word that was used in February. That's the word that keeps popping up. And your guy, Ira Schafel, asked that tonight. And Peter Collins did not hesitate to answer that.
There's a gap, is an understatement, right? Between some of the conferences and, say, the Big Ten or the SEC. And the question is that insurmountable? And what does insurmountable mean? And I think today, when you think about where we're going to be next year with the SEC and the Big Ten relative to what we make, like I said, if you took our non-conference or take the TV revenue out of it, we're fourth, I think, in both conferences in an amount of revenue that we generate. But once you throw the TV contract in, that gap is massive. And when the gap gets that large, is it insurmountable? And I think I said at our meeting in February that it's almost impossible to make up that gap. And I think A.D. Alford said it's impossible, and he's not wrong. Our boosters are doing an unbelievable job. Everybody's doing a great job of fundraising at the university, but we're going to be $30 million, $35, $40 million behind the other conferences. And so that's an insurmountable gap that you have to do something about. And I'm not breaking any news there, I don't think.
Jeff, what do you do about an insurmountable gap? How do you do that? How do you overcome that?
Yeah, and it compounds each year that you lose out by the tune of $40 million, and it continues to grow. And, clearly there isn't a path that is easily found to get out from under this. But what Florida State has chosen to do is make as much noise as possible.
Yeah.
And letting them know. I mean, this, Andy, if you go back to this, you and I have had this discussion, and lots of people around the conference at one time thought that the grant of rights would be deemed, I think, lock solid or unbreakable, if however you want to describe it.
Yep.
I'm not so sure people believe that anymore. I don't think Peter Collins and others at Florida State believe that. The question wasn't whether or not you could find an avenue by which to legally challenge it. It was that, do you want to? And Florida State appears to me to be willing at this point, out of desperation, financial desperation, to be the villain. Somebody has to say, we're leaving. And if that means we're going to court, then so be it. Now, I don't think they want to go to court. Nobody does. Their hope, I believe, is that this will bring people to the bargaining table, Andy, that at some point, if it's inevitable that Florida State, Clemson, and maybe others are going to leave the ACC and that the ACC is going to continue to fall behind, wouldn't it behoove the ACC or ESPN, if you'd like, to get something for these assets before they make their way down the road?
Yeah, and that's the thing. We've seen reports. This is the part of realignment where stuff gets crazy. This week we see Clemson and Florida State to the Big Ten. It's a done deal. We have no idea. We have no idea if the Big Ten even wants to expand. We've talked about the same thing with Oregon and Washington this week. We don't know.
Right.
Perhaps the people at Florida State and Clemson have a better idea of where everybody else is, but they're not talking about that. And it's interesting, as vocal as Peter Collins was, he chose his words carefully when it came to talking about the Big Ten or the SEC.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. And the point I should make, though, is this is not just Florida State feeling this way. Clemson, Miami, and North Carolina absolutely are in their boat. I know there are other schools that they've met with and that are unhappy in the ACC, but those four, for the most part, feel the same way. They may not be as willing to do as much about it as Florida State.
Don't you think, though, Andy, too, that there's so many angles to come at this from? Could Florida State not be reaching out in some ways or sounding the alarm to the Big 12 as well in saying that, hey, maybe not us, but there are other assets of this conference that you may want to talk to, such as Louisville, such as some of the other schools that we've mentioned, Virginia Tech, Pitt, whomever you'd like to point to, schools that likely wouldn't get the offer to go to, say, either the Big Ten or the SEC.
To destabilize the ACC and have enough
destabilize
people
the
to
ACC.
disband it. Yes.
You're trying to create a point of critical mass where then at some point all sides begin to talk. So Andy, I think at some point you're going to make enough noise that we're going to see somebody come to the table. And, it hasn't happened so far. But I also think that Florida State will continue to sound the alarm.
Well, and it is a loud alarm. And, the stopgap the ACC has tried to consider is this unequal revenue distribution. They came out of the meeting in Amelia Island in the spring saying we don't have the framework for it yet, but we've agreed to talk about it. Here's what Peter Collins said about that Tuesday night. So if you thought that they were suddenly singing Kumbaya on this, they're not.
I think the unequal revenue distribution model, it's not going to get us there. It's just really not going to get us there. Let's say that the unequal revenue distribution model it gives Florida State, let's say, $6 million more a year. Okay. Well, now we're not losing 35, we're losing $29 million a year to our competitors. That's still, you could argue that's still insurmountable. And so I don't think that under the current way that people are looking at it, that we're going to close the gap with an unequal revenue distribution.
Yeah. He didn't mince any words there. Like, I'm not used to this from people who can actually, this is a person who, if Florida State does find itself in a realignment scenario or does find itself trying to get out of the ACC, this is one of the people who will help make that decision.
Don't you think, though, Andy, it's refreshing?
Yeah, I like it.
I mean, honestly, go back to that Board of Trustees meeting that you referenced. The second that happened, where the performative give and take between Michael Alford and Peter Collins took place, aware that this was on camera and being filmed and on YouTube and that everybody would have access to it. From that moment forward, we knew Florida State's intentions. Now, they can have to play nice in public settings, and you don't want to start a public feud through the press while you're in a meeting in Amelia Island with other ACC programs and athletic directors. And, you know, to some degree, to a large degree, Jim Phillips is not at fault here. So there's not a lot he can do. And I think Michael Alford realizes that would be beating a dead horse. Jim Phillips is going to have to represent the ACC as best he can. He may have a losing hand, but he's certainly not going to kowtow to Florida State or anybody else at this situation. He's going to try to prop up the conference as he just did in Charlotte. I just came from those meetings. And, you know, he spent a lot of time talking an awful lot about lacrosse and soccer and the championships that were won in non-revenue sports. And I can assure you that did not embolden anybody to stick around.
Jim Phillips may not be there either. He's named in an awful lot of lawsuits at Northwestern right now.
Right. So I think that you walk away from the thing at Amelia Island, you walk away from the ACC kickoff that just occurred, and you realize that this feels inevitable. The hows and whys and who's and what's real and what's not, and what are the possibilities and the legalities, this is all up for debate. You get a lot of, I'm sure, emails and calls, as do I, from lawyers and people who would pretend to tell you that this could happen. And all. We don't know. I don't know that. But I do know that they're not going to be quiet. And around every turn, it gets louder.
Well, he got the question about the grant of rights, which is the kind of the key question. That's what everybody wants to know about is what do you do? Do you have a handle on the grant of rights? Because those were the words that he used back in February that everybody was like, oh, really? Because people have been studying this thing for years, and a lot of people didn't think it was possible to get out of it. So let's just hear Peter Collins' answer on the grant of rights question.
Yeah.
You would be very disappointed in us if we didn't spend a lot of resources, financial and human resources, understanding the grant of rights. You would say that it was sort of malfeasance if we didn't understand the grant of rights. So when I say we have a handle on the grant of rights, we understand the documents very well. We understand our position on those documents. We understand the legal arguments on those in that document. We understand who the actual parties would be under those documents, and we believe we have. I think that I said it best. I mean, we have a very good handle on what our risks are under that document, what our opportunities are under that document, and that's the least of my worries. And that's based on what we know. So when I say we have a good handle on it, I mean, we understand it. We have gotten a lot of counsel on that document, and that will not be the document that keeps us from taking action. And that I'll leave it at that.
I wanted to follow up on that real quick because one thing I've noticed, as a reporter, we were observers. And one thing I've observed is the tenor nationally, like 6 months ago or beyond, when a lot of college football media experts like us, the two experts you're talking to right now, would say things like the grant of rights was, ironclad, nobody can move, 2036, there's nothing that can change, like everything's, and it seems like those talking points have kind of faded a little bit. Do you
I would agree with that.
Right.
Very interesting. And least of his worries.
Well, that was the part, Andy, right?
Yeah.
When he said that, I was watching along with everybody else, and I thought the same thing. Wow. to phrase it, to coin it, to say that's the least of our worries is fascinating. And that is ratcheting up, certainly, the intensity of the conversation and the necessity to leave in a way that hasn't been done before. First, there was the messaging, hey, we're not happy. We may want to get out from under this, to maybe we need to talk about other streams of revenue and, uneven distribution, to, yeah, we've had a good long look at the grant of rights. We understand our opportunities, and it's the last thing that will keep us from moving. That is a fascinating way of describing the grant of rights and what they've been counseled on regarding it.
Well, let's throw a date out there for everybody. And this is not just a Florida State date. This is a Clemson date, a North Carolina date, a Miami date. August 15th. If you hypothetically wanted to leave the ACC and play in another conference in 2024, you would have to notify the ACC by August 15th. So either something will happen by then, or there will be some hornet's nests on some message boards on August 16th.
Yeah, the hard part there, Andy, is I don't know if the end goal is to be playing somewhere else by 2024. They would welcome it if it was a possibility.
But it might not be. Yeah.
It may not be, and I cautioned my listeners today that I'm not so sure that Florida State's going to be playing in another conference next year. Now, they may be in 2025, which obviously is a very different timeline than 2036.
Yes.
And so I think
2036, Jeff, we better have flying cars and jetpacks by then. Seriously.
We could do this interview from each other's houses as we just fly to and fro.
We'll teleport.
Yeah.
And do it.
Just make it happen by then.
Do it together. Yeah.
I will say this, and I don't speak for Florida State, but it certainly seems to me, with the way conference realignment has worked recently, and certainly the now rhetoric that we're listening to on a daily and weekly basis, there's zero chance Florida State will be playing in the ACC in 2036. Where it gets interesting is where we begin to debate how soon could a negotiation happen, or would it happen? When would ESPN act? When would Fox act? When would Florida State feel emboldened? Is there a dollar amount? Is it $500 million? If $400 million grants you the right to walk away, all in on $400 million, I think they would do it. I think they want to know a number, Andy.
Well, I just wonder if Florida State's going to go it alone, because I know that there are other schools that have looked into this that feel the same way. The question is, are they going to be willing to put themselves out there publicly and try to do it?
Well, one of the problems is that nobody wants to get sued.
Correct.
So
Syracuse and BC could get real litigious real fast.
Yeah. And also, if you're a conference, let's just say hypothetically, that is interested in grabbing an asset like Clemson or grabbing an asset like Florida State, you're going to be very careful that is not documented in any way. This would be the classic back alley, dark room. Hey, you've got a landing spot. We'll help you out with some of the finances if you can untangle yourself from the grant of rights. But there would never be an official offer. It would always be an off-the-record offer. It has to be, or else the ACC would come after those conferences.
Well, I mean, Arizona has an offer from the Big 12 right now, but it's not an official offer. I mean, the only way that would work is Arizona would have to withdraw from the Pac-12, ask the Big 12. It'd be the same thing if Florida State wanted to leave the ACC or anybody else want to leave anywhere else. So there is an order of operations to these things, but you're right about that. I would not be surprised, though, if those wink, wink, nudge, nudge back alley conversations are happening.
I don't know how they couldn't be, because we know that North Carolina is very desired, for example.
Yes.
I think it's an educated guess. You got context clues. You have conversations with folks in the business and have for years. North Carolina would be valued by both, I think, the Big Ten and the SEC.
Yes, there would be a nice little tug of war if suddenly North Carolina was a free agent.
Yeah, and I think that there are others. Florida State may be one of them. Clemson may be one of them. I think it stands to reason. And so, yeah, I'm quite sure that there have been some sort of conversations, unofficial, about the possibility. And I think the second that there's a number that Florida State would be comfortable with and there's a real opportunity, then all of a sudden you get people coming to the negotiating table. That I think that is their hope.
Yeah, and the number I think could be pretty huge, because we are talking about between now and 2036. This is not like Texas and Oklahoma trying to get out of an extra year in the Big 12. This is a long, long time. We could be talking, 12 years, 11 years, 10 years, depending on when all this happens. But Jeff, it's fascinating. I cannot wait to see what happens next. There's a Board of Regents meeting at Florida State tomorrow. Now, Collins was pretty upfront about that. He said, while it was scheduled fairly recently, it is something they had in the works. It was just something they had to get stuff done.
Right.
But he also said he would not be shocked if the president got questions from the board about athletics in the ACC, and that if they talked about it.
Yeah, he seemed to indicate that he wouldn't be surprised at all if there was some sort of open dialogue about the possibility of leaving the ACC. Certainly that is going to be a question that comes up forevermore until it happens. I mean, this is going to be something that they have to field in terms of a question, and they welcome it because it's an opportunity to launch into whatever it is they want to push in that moment. And I don't mean that as a derogatory thing. I think that they're interested in creating a narrative and consistently pounding that narrative that they're open for business. They're ready to get out of the ACC. They've made it abundantly clear.
Cannot wait to see what the next shoe to drop in Tallahassee is. Jeff Cameron, I'm sure we'll be bugging you again very soon.
I love it, buddy. It's great to have you on board here at On3. Be good, Andy.
Thank you, Jeff. That's Jeff Cameron from Warchant.